Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I guess it maybe perhaps is an afternoon where you're listening or when you're listening. So let's redo the beginning and just say good day and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. I'm Edward, otherwise known as the Lightkeeper, and this week we are going to talk a little bit about etiquette in the world of the BDSM DS lifestyle. It should, maybe for some of you, some of these will be no-brainers. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we do need to talk about etiquette, expectations, things like that, because some of it may be new, or let's just face it, the way some people act in, especially the online world. Etiquette is something that perhaps we should have a conversation about because just because we are dealing with absolutely kinktastic things, it doesn't mean we have to act like idiots, for lack of a better expression. Um, and some of it may be undereducation that leads to it, and other things could just be people being people and choosing not to educate themselves. So no matter what the reason, we're going to dive into a little bit of BDSM etiquette today. We're going to kind of talk about, well, really, I guess we'll look at four areas specifically for etiquette. The first is going to be um, titles and pet names, which seems to be an area where there's a lot of etiquette breaches. And then we're going to talk about, if you are newer, things that you might not be familiar with. What is the etiquette at a munch? What is a munch? And then we're going to talk about etiquette at play parties and, talk about what a play party is. And then finally, we're going to just sort of talk through some random areas where it might not hurt to have a refresher or perhaps learn something new about some just general etiquette or expectations around the lifestyle. So before we dive in deeper, let's just first start with a very, very basic thing, but it's something that unfortunately you see far too often online, where this is not done. And it's just to be respectful in your communications. You don't have to agree with what everyone says online, and you certainly can and should share your opinions, especially if they are divergent from another person. But we can do so with respect and have open, honest communications about BDSM without being, you know, big pricks. We can be kind to those we disagree with because it feels like so often we forget that there's a person behind the screening. There's an actual living human being with feelings behind it. And while we may vehemently disagree with what they're sharing, and it's good and fine and well to do all of that, but we need to just remember that there's a human there, and while it is good, it's acceptable to disagree, we need to remember to just be kind to them. So I guess that's our first little bit of, etiquette lesson, and that is be kind. Remember there's a person behind the kinks, or there's a person behind the profile, or there's a person behind the opinion that you might disagree with. And so while disagreement is helpful, it's a great way to learn. Just be kind. And if sometimes it's hard to do, but the old saying, if you don't have something nice to say, perhaps it's best to not say anything at all. So that's where we'll start with. Now we're going to get into pet names and titles. And this is always something that has just baffled me. pet names and titles do play a significant role in sort of helping establish or reinforce roles within a lifestyle relationship, whether it's just using them during playtime or using them all the time. They can convey respect, affection, um, submission, or dominance. They can do all of that, and they're a wonderful, fun way. And there's often significance behind them for partners, but they are also misused. And the biggest where place where they're misused is people don't ask for consent. They just launch into using, for example, a pet name. And it kind of drives me bananas. To pick on some male dominance, but it seems like in the online world, many male dominants seem to use princess to refer to every submissive that they meet along the way in their journey. It's princess this, princess that, princess, princess, princess. Now that's great if in your relationship you are submissive and you've chosen princess to kind of be the pet name and they've agreed to it. That's fantastic. But remember, you don't get to call anybody else princess unless they consent to it, first of all. And there are some people out there that are, I guess we'll call it old school, or perhaps, yeah, old school would be the best way to do it, that believe that a dominant should be addressed by a title, often use sir as the title, sir this or sir that. Even if they don't know the person, they reach out and use sir as an honorific when they're addressing them. And I understand where this is coming from. They want to show respect. They want to show kindness. They don't mean anything malicious or bad behind it. But I am a firm believer that, especially for dominance, titles need to be earned and earned individually, not just kind of cumulative through a community. So, it's okay when you're interacting with somebody, especially dominant, for perhaps the first several times, many times, to not use an honorific. They need to earn that title. I understand there are, like I said, people that disagree with that, but that's where I'm coming from. It needs to be something that is earned, and then it's negotiated. Is it okay if I call you sir? And another one that unfortunately I hear far too often, see it used from submissives online, is the title of daddy. To me, daddy is it's more than a sign of just respect, like sir. That doesn't really kind of trip my trigger the wrong way, like the use of daddy does. To me, daddy is implying some sort of relationship happening. It's not a title of respect, it's more of a title term of endearment. And many submissives will reach out to a dominant for the first time and start their message, dear daddy, or, and it's like, whoa, no, no, no. We haven't consented to this and you don't know me. What are you doing using that? So it does go both ways, but when it comes to titles and or pet names, we have to negotiate. Is it okay if I call you this? Is it okay if I use this title? And we should respect that people have different preferences. Um, for example, using once again, the title of daddy. There are some submissives who find that title perfect, ideal. And then for other submissives, or even dominants, they can find that title, um, not to their liking. It's not something they want to be called. Perhaps it's even a trigger for them. So it's important to respect that other people have preferences in titles and pet names. And so it's very important that we follow etiquette, um, and ask for permission. How do you feel about this? I would like to call you by this. Is that okay? And absolutely respect um, what somebody decides or what their preferences are. Just because you're a dominant doesn't give you the ability to override a submissive's preferences. If they say no, they don't like that title or to use that title, respect it. Find something that's unique to you. You don't have to use the traditional ones. You can find, what works for you. Personally speaking, just, the name Edward when it's said a certain way can be super, super empowering for my dominant side. It truly can without having to use an honorific or a pet name. So it's oftentimes tone or how it's used can be perhaps even more important than what is used. It's also important once you do have you know, the consent down and the agreement when it comes to titles or pet names, because they are often tools to help reinforce the power dynamic that is in place. It's important to consistently use them in appropriate contexts because it is a very subtle tool that is a reinforcer for the lifestyle and the relationship. So once they've sort of been agreed upon and things are blossoming in the relationship, they should be used consistently. However, you do need to be mindful of where you are, who's around, what the situation is, because obviously not all places and times are appropriate. It's very important to understand that, um, and understand that a vanilla person might um, be put off by some of the titles and terms that we use in the lifestyle and to not use them in those instances. And it's also important to understand that pet names they can and do evolve with a relationship. Just because someone starts out as on the dominant side as daddy, it doesn't mean that they are going to keep that honorific through the relationships. Relationships evolve. So maybe over time something more personal comes up to light and it just works for the people in the relationship. Or they move to a deeper, stronger BDSM commitment and want to change daddy to master. However, it's important to recognize that just as relationships evolve, the honorifics that gets used also can evolve, and that's not a bad thing. So that's the bit on titles and honorifics and pet names, but just please, please, please always have consent before you journey down the honorific or pet name road. If it's never something that should just be assumed that you can use it. Is it okay if I call you, or I'd like to call you? How do you feel about that? And respect their feedback. And dominance, a challenge for you. Don't use the same pet name over and over and over with different submissives. It drives me absolutely batty. I'm sorry, I don't mean to rant here, but I'm going to. It drives me batty when I see dominants use the same pet name over and over and over um, for different submissives. It seems like there should be something unique there about everyone. Everyone that we date and enter a relationship with is unique and different than every other relationship we've had in the past. And I just think that many dominants can do better than sort of reusing the pet name they used for their last submissive or the last submissive they were dating. Find something, something unique will come up when we date. There's always that unique moment where it's sort of like, aha, there's the ideal nickname or the ideal pet name. It just happens. So strive to do that. And submissives, strive to maybe do something out of the the realm of, rather than sir, daddy, master. or mistress, however, it seems like the honorifics for a dominant can be, limited to those. Search for something that's different, that's unique, that fits them and fits you. It doesn't have to be something that the canons of BDSM say is a a predetermined, appropriate title. Find what works for you. So think outside the box and just enjoy life rather than having to sort of feel like you have to fit certain things in a BDSM box. So let's move on and talk a little bit about munches. Now, a munch is nothing more than a casual gathering of people who are kinky or they're into DS or they're into BDSM or they're curious about it. It's just a gathering of these people in a vanilla space. This is not, a munch is not a place to show up in your, spank me harder t-shirt and assless chap. It is not. It's, like I said, it's an informal gathering in a vanilla space where you get together and you get to know other people who are into or interested about the lifestyle. Kind of a chance to socialize and build a little bit of a community. And for the vast majority of munches, unless they state otherwise, um, the way you dress would be sort of grandma and grandpa approved. It's 1,000% vanilla. You don't wear anything remotely kinky. You just are going as you would out normally. And if by chance you normally wear an I love BDSM t-shirt, you wouldn't wear it there because that would not make the people who are the munch host very happy. It's absolutely a safe space for people who are just curious and want to start to build their community, build their bear community, to interact with and get to know people. And many munches can be specific. Typically, the larger community that you're a part of, the more options you have, whether it's age range, maybe perhaps a munch specific to submissives, or a munch specific to dominance, or switches, or um, a munch for sadist, or a munch for masochist. There's all sorts of different options in larger communities, and then in smaller communities. I live in a smaller community. Um, a munch is sort of like, oh, hey, you're kinky. You are welcome here. We are so glad to see you. And sort of much more just come as you are and just enjoy being in the company of other people who have like-minded thoughts or desires. And many munches don't actually have a space where you talk about kinky things. You can talk about all the regular, just vanilla things. You're just kinky people having vanilla conversations because you're meeting at a restaurant or you're meeting at a pub or a bookstore and you're just having a conversation. Now, some munches do have places where maybe they have a private room at a restaurant or they have the loft in the bookstore set aside for them for their munch so that they can have the privacy to discuss kinky things if that is something that people want to talk about in the munch. So it varies from munch to munch, but it's more geared to just being um, a vanilla meeting up or meetup, really, of kinky people, and they share a vanilla space. So it's very important when it comes to munch etiquette to obviously, you know, follow the dress code, be grandparent friendly in what you're wearing. And it's also very important that you maintain and respect the privacy of other people that are there. You are not going to want to talk about what happened there afterwards. Even if you're talking with other kinky people, you may talk about the munch you went and if there's a topic, maybe what was talked about, but you're not going to say, oh, so and so was there, so and so wasn't there, blah blah blah. You're valuing the discretion of people, and you would expect them to do the same thing. And it's also very important that if you're at a munch and you want to talk about something kinktastic related, and you're unsure whether it is allowed or not, obviously, ask permission to talk about it. And the other thing is those conversations that are kinky that happen at a munch um, really shouldn't be shared outside of that munch. Perhaps talk to your friends, if you do. Oh, we had a discussion about this or that. Um, excuse me. But you don't need to sort of spill the tea and share everything that everyone said and where people align and where people don't align and all of that. It's just about being respectful. And it's also important to respect personal boundaries at Munches. Just because it's a gathering of kinky people doesn't mean you should make assumptions based on how somebody is dressed, what their gender is, and therefore they might be dominant or submissive. All those crazy things that people try to use as determinants. Don't fall into that crap, if you will. And also, if you haven't been to a munch before, you should expect it to be an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere. So if you are, say, transphobic, don't go to a munch. Just don't. In fact, my opinion would be don't get involved in the lifestyle. But if you have fears or you're um, afraid that for whatever reason, people who are gay offend you, make you scared, don't go to a munch. Just go away. Because munches are really any lifestyle gathering is a diverse and welcoming place. So if you can't handle diversity, if you can't handle that sort of thing, then the in-person community is not a place for you at all. And hopefully this podcast isn't a place for you either. But once again, a munch is that vanilla gathering of kinky people in a vanilla space. So refrain from being overtly sexual, refrain from really explicit discussions, and there are certainly not going to be any displays of kinktastic things at a munch setting. Unless, for example, a munch is happening in a BDSM friendly space or a BDSM club, for example, then it might be less discreet. But if you are meeting at Joe's Pizza Shack, don't expect anything other than casual, vanilla conversation between people who happen to be kinky. Also, before you go to that munch, most munch hosts, do have rules and guidelines, and they set them out, and they're very clear, so you understand. So understand what the guidelines are for the munch. Also, yeah, I shouldn't have to say it, but I do need to say it. If it's your first time going to a munch, don't go in there thinking you're going to run the show because it's not your show to run. There are organizers who do this. It's one thing if at the end of the munch, if you share some feedback that you have with one of the organizers, that's fabulous. They would welcome that in most cases. Um, but yeah, don't go in there expecting to run the show. Just go in and be respectful of what the host and have built, and be thankful that you have the opportunity to attend something like this. Um, and also, please, 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 at a munch, be respectful of the staff at the vanilla venue that's having it. Tip your servers well. Be polite. All these things that unfortunately we shouldn't have to say, but we have to say in today's day and age. And the next question many people who are newer will ask is, how do I find a munch? They're very easy to find. I believe the easiest way to find them is to create an account over at FetLife. That's FetLife, FetLife.com. You don't have to share all sorts of personal data, of course. It's social media. It's social media sort of the builds itself as a kinky Facebook. So it has anything and everything there. But and of course, it wants information for your profile. You don't have to share it. You can be 103 years old, live in Antarctica if you want to, for your anonymity. Absolutely fine. But you can go in, they have a tab at the top that's called events, and you put in your zip code, your postal code, and tell it the range that you want to circle, have it search for around your area, and it'll pop up with what's going on. So that's a great, easy way to find a munch. And when it does pop up and there's one in your neck of the woods, you click on it and it tells you, all kind of about the munch and who the hosts are. So if you have any questions, you can reach out directly to them. It's a very handy tool to use. Some people have suggested using Meetup to find munches. Um, and I'm sure that can work, but I think that would be a bit more of a challenge because Meetup is obviously geared very vanilla. So it would potentially mean reading through a lot of sort of reading through the lines and trying to decipher if there was, something kinky there or if not. So I really do think FetLife is the easiest place to go to find an event in your neck of the woods. So the next step, many people kind of move, they start with munches and then get curious, or they make some friends at a munch, and those friends that you've met go to what is called a play party. Now, these are held in spaces that are obviously BDSM friendly, often a club dedicated or has a certain section set aside for BDSM enthusiasts. And a play party is not only do you have a social component, there's always a, social area, hang out, have a coffee, chat with other people, but it's much more lifestyle friendly than a munch. This is the place where you can wear your I love BDSM t-shirt and your assless chaps and be perfectly okay. Um, it's a place where people can experiment, they can try new things from, say, for example, furniture. You're curious what it would be like to be tied on a St. Andrew's cross. Well, they're probably going to have something like that. So before you go drop all the coin to build or buy your own little cross for your dungeon in the home that you have with your white picket fence outside, you can find out if that's for you. So it's a place where those involved in the lifestyle can get together. And if you want to engage in casual play with others, you can do so in a safer environment. It is safer because a play party has something called dungeon monitors or dungeon masters, however you want to phrase it. But there are people that are there to make sure that safe words are respected, the safe gestures are respected, scene is where people are engaging in BDSM play, that the scene is um, being done in a safer manner, and basically it's in a place where you can explore, perhaps with a partner or perhaps just with a friend, and you can do so, with having sort of the safety of others around you. If you're an exhibitionist, with your BDSM play, that's fantastic because people often can watch. So it's a much more lifestyle centric gathering. Uh, Now, every venue that has a play party is going to have very, is going to have rules. So they're such as, dress codes. Some may allow alcohol, others may not. Others may allow certain kinds of play, not other kinds of play. Some are sex positive, some are not. And so it's very important to understand the venue in its own rules and guidelines and to make sure that you are staying within them. It's also very important in a setting like this to make sure you obtain consent and that your negotiations are complete, even complex negotiations. Um, for example, in a play party, which is a environment where people who are friends with benefits, or even acquaintances that engage in play together, um, don't assume aftercare will be a part of it in a situation like this, unless you've specifically negotiated it. Everything that happens in a scene from the beginning to the end with aftercare must be negotiated in detail. So if you're perhaps a little too shy or a little too nervous to have those conversations, perhaps go to a play party to observe, see, and kind of have your mind blown. It is a mind blowing experience the first time you experience one. But go experience it rather than perhaps dive into uh, to the whole playing part of it. Another thing to understand when you are watching a scene where other people are playing, you have to sort of approach it like you would um, golf. And perhaps you're not familiar with golf, but the thing with etiquette with golf is you're to be quiet when your fellow competitors are sort of doing their golfing thing. You're quiet. You don't clap. You don't yell. You don't whoop or any of that stuff. So if you're watching somebody else sing, which can actually be very educational, see how they do it and see how it differs from you, or, ooh, hey, there's a new trick to try. You don't interrupt. You don't offer unsolicited advice. You don't clap. You don't holler. You just quietly watch. And it doesn't mean that the whole thing is quiet. They do have social areas, so you don't have to sit there and quietly watch people you don't care about engaging in a scene you don't care to watch. You can go be social and hang out with other people. And a lot of people go to play parties because of the openness, where they can, freely be their kinktastic selves, and yet they don't play with others. They just like the openness, the environment, and the fact that, they can just enjoy being openly kinky, openly into BDSM, openly into DS, and not have to hide it, not have to dress vanilla, um, and socialize and be in that environment. And remember, it's important to be discreet about these. These are not something that you share with your vanilla friends. Hey, I went to this BDSM club and it's located at 101st Street and Division. Uh, you're might talk about that you went, but you're discreet about where it was, what you saw, who you saw there, all those sorts of things. Um, it's very much sort of I would equate it to Las Vegas. What happens there stays there. It's that sort of simple thing. Um, so there's that with play parties. Now let's move on to some of the unfortunately too common um, sort of etiquette breaches that happen in the lifestyle. Some of these, I apologize, will seem common sense to many of you listeners, but they happen, so we have to talk about them briefly. So the first one is assuming consent based on clothing or appearance. And that one, of course, comes over from the vanilla world, and it unfortunately is no different in BDSM. Well, look at the outfit they were wearing. Because they were wearing this, it meant they wanted that. We all know that is crap. But unfortunately, there are people who do see the world through those lenses. And it's very important that we not see the world through that lens. And if we do run into somebody who does see the world that way, that we correct how they see it. So there's that. And then we have people who assume what your role is. Uh, for many reasons, they may assume your role because of how you're dressed or how you carry yourself. For example, people may misjudge um, a woman who is outspoken to be a dominant because being an outspoken woman somehow causes them to be labeled as dominant when they can, in fact, be submissive. How someone carries themselves or what their demeanor is doesn't necessarily equate to a role. So it's very important to not assume that the way someone acted or acts in more of a vanilla setting somehow equates to their role. Another thing is don't discuss intimate details of things without the expressed consent of those involved. We want to keep our private lives private and not cause anyone to become embarrassed. So, don't share unless you have permission to share. And this one, it can be a challenge. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It can be a challenge for others just because they're stuck in the 1950s. But try to always use a person's preferred pronouns or gender identities within, when you're at a BDSM event. And where I said that this sometimes can be a challenge, one of my dear friends, uh, their um, one of their children has recently come out as trans and loving, supportive. However, there is, it just I sort of feel for my friend, been parent to the child, obviously for 20 some years, and it's hard to um, sometimes catch yourself using the pronouns you used for 20 years. And that causes occasionally a bit of a rift, even though they do not mean any harm by it. And it's something that they're, working together on rather than letting it be an issue to drive them apart. But it is frustrates both of them. It frustrates my friend when they misuse it because they're like, how can I, you know, why do I keep doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. And they get mad at themselves. And so, but anyways, I digress. But always use the pronouns or the gender identity that someone requests you to. It's simple, it's common sense. But it is, common sense is uncommon in this world. Um, Also, always respect the guidelines at the community event that you're a part of. Show respect for the community, show respect for the values, follow the rules. Don't, you know, just because you are breaking the rules of society in a way by exploring kink, doesn't mean that you are going to need to be a rule breaker at an event. Just be kind, follow the etiquette, follow the rules that are there. Also, you see this from time to time in really any subgroup of people. Anytime you get a gathering of people together, there's some people who get cliquish or they try to, sort of make their lunch table the exclusive lunch table, and they sort of will invite in people or exclude other people from their their special place or their clique. Endeavor to not engage in exclusatory behavior in this lifestyle. Have your group of friends be welcoming to new people, welcoming to veterans, welcoming of people who see things differently than you do. So it's it's something that happens when we gather people together. We do get some clicks and clacks. So endeavor to not be a person that is creating or kind of continuing on a clique. Um, this once again falls in the shouldn't have to say, but don't invade somebody's personal space. I'm not talking about touching inappropriately or not having consent to touch, but just like, I don't know, it seems like maybe, perhaps it's just my experience, but there's always somebody at work that wants to kind of get in your personal space when they talk to you, or yeah, it sort of like gives me the heebie-jeebies, like, oh yeah, this is my personal space. If you could stay over in your personal space, we'd get along a lot better. But it sometimes happens in kink because people are shy, especially who are new, so you might want to sort of get closer and talk in a more hushed voice. Just be careful that you're not invading personal space when you're hush voicing and getting a little closer. Um, Next up, don't judge, don't kink shame. Just because somebody does something that isn't your jam, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean that they are doing something unsafe. What happens between consenting adults happens between consenting adults. The simplest thing is don't yuck on another person's yuck. Um, so it can be very hard, especially when you are newer. Some of the things can seem very extreme, even revolting, possibly. But it's important to not judge or shame those who do things differently than you do. Um, then we have people that make assumptions about boundaries. Um, they take those craptastic stereotypes that exist about the lifestyle and they sort of use those stereotypes and generalizations um, to assume that this person's boundary is this or their limit is that, um, based on these stereotypes and generalizations, rather than having an open and honest conversation. And what happens when you do that is you have breaches of consent and you have angry people. So don't ever assume a limit or a boundary. Always have an open and honest discussion about it. Um, this is something that many people who are newer in the lifestyle they fear, um, and it has happened to people before. Unfortunately, it will happen again. But never ever out somebody. Never ever share that. Hey, you went to you know the munch at Tommy Two Tones, and you saw Jenny there, and Jenny's phone number is 8675309, and for a good time, give her a call. Don't ever do that. Don't ever put somebody in a position where they may feel like they're being outed or even, um, you know, unintentionally sort of outing somebody. Never, ever, ever do that. And if you are newer, take precautions because this is a legitimate fear. I think that most people who are new have. Um, don't necessarily use your real name. Perhaps use your real first name if you're comfortable with that. But sort of have a kinktastic persona that you go by, so you don't have to worry about it. They can, if somebody from Tommy Two Tones outs you, well, they're not outing you; they're outing this fictional creation that you've created, so you don't even have to worry about it. Um, and then, of course, talked a few minutes ago about the personal space invader. We also have the person who is the oversharer of personal information. Don't be the oversharer of personal information. You may want to tell someone about yourself in all its glorious and gritty details, but don't. Be careful with what you share. Be conscious of what you share, because sometimes when we overshare, we are sharing things that make other people feel very uncomfortable. So just mind what you're sharing. Um, There are also people that you may meet. These are typically online interactions rather than in person, where people will pressure you to want to talk about BDSM, what your experiences are, what experiences you want to have, how you identify. before you're ready to have that conversation. So when you meet somebody that is pressuring you sort of to disclose things, that's also a red flag that that's really all they care about from you is that they're just interested in the kinktastic side of you. They don't care to get to know the entire person that you are. Um, Now, it's here's one of my favorite little etiquette things from back in the day. And this was an old school thing, but back in the day when I first got started in this wonderful world of BDSM, the internet was in its infancy. Um, there was the old school belief, going back to sort of the Leatherman days here in the States, that submissives should sort of like they could make themselves noticeable to a dominant, like they could at a munch be attentive to a dominant they liked, like, oh, would you like me to get you a refill on your soda, sir? Would you, that sort of thing, but they could not express to that dominant that, I find you attractive and I would like to get to know you. They had to sit back and hope that their little acts of service would get noticed by the dominant. And that sort of etiquette misconception thing still exists out there with some people, and that's wrong. So this is if you like a dominant, they're heck, ask them out directly. Just do it. That old school belief is gone. We can safely move beyond it. So don't think that because you identify as submissive that you can't make the first move. Uh, Another thing that happens in the lifestyle is that oftentimes people will offer you unsolicited advice. Now, it's one thing to reach out to somebody if you see them walking down the primrose path to bad choices, and saying, hey, I've noticed you shared this. I'm a bit concerned. Just want to make you aware that, your behavior could lead you to a bad situation. There's a difference between that and saying, just the craptastic unsolicited advice that people like to dole out. You know, it's one thing if somebody says, "Hey, what do you think?" But if they don't ask what you're thinking, don't give them unsolicited advice. And same with criticism. We may not agree with what somebody says, but just because we don't agree doesn't mean we have to like openly criticize them. And for whatever reason, we live in a world where if you don't agree, then you must criticize the person, not the thoughts. And it's very important that for an open and accepting community that we, yes, intervene when we see somebody about to make a potentially tragic mistake, but that we are very cautious with how and when we offer unsolicited advice, and and don't be harsh. Uh, and the final thing is just be courteous and respectful. There's no need to use inappropriate language or tone. And it just means sort of when we're getting to know somebody, um, we kind of live in a rather profane world. Uh, Believe it or not, I know I don't swear that much on the podcast. I can and do sound like a sailor. I was a sailor in my earlier life. So yeah, I can have a potty mouth. I'm a hockey player, which should tell you that, yeah, I know how to use profanities wonderfully. But we don't need to use profanities wonderfully when we're interacting with people who are new to us. We can be respectful. We don't need to be condescending. We don't need to make a joke that might be offensive. I do a lot of trainings for work, and I typically always start one of my little training sessions with a joke, which are bad, horrible, typically daddish jokes. But they are designed to get an eye roll, maybe a couple of polite laughs, and to offend no one. And we should really strive to not be offensive with the language, the tones, all of that, and just to be respectful. And I know that's asking a lot in today's world, but really we can do it. And it makes the lifestyle stronger and better because it makes more people feel welcomed. And the more people we make feel welcomed, the more people that explore the lifestyle, the more people that explore the lifestyle, the less on the margins we feel as a lifestyle. So it all just comes together rather nicely. So I hope that you don't mind that we spent the last 50 or so minutes chatting about different etiquettes and different ideas and things like that around the lifestyle. But it's very important to, for lack of a better word, just be a darn good person in the lifestyle. And the better we treat others, the better we can expect ourselves to be treated. So with that, we shall call it a week, and I look forward to chatting with you next week when we are going to get into the fun of vetting a potential person to date. We're going to start talking about vetting, and then following our conversation about vetting, we're going to talk about dating. How much fun will that be? Because, let's face it, dating is awesome, right? We all love dating. Some of us do, some of us don't. But we're going to talk about how to some tools, tips, tricks when it comes to vetting in the lifestyle because we do need to be a little extra cautious because of some of the unique folks that are out there inhabiting the mean streets of BDSM. So next week we're going to do a little vetting. So perhaps if you need to go to the vet to get some booster shots, perhaps do that. Different kind of vet. But anyway, on that bad joke, we'll call it an episode. And I hope your week is awesome. And I can't wait to spend some more time with you next week.